Hey everyone, so we're going to do the financial inventory segment for mortgage protection telesales, and this is kind of what I do during this process, okay? So as you can see with the client assessment, I think it's very important to always write the date, okay? So today is the 13th of January. I'm going to put in the 13th of 2024. Okay. So when you're here, again, reminder, you got the affirmative yes, that they said, yes, I understand the process. And you say, perfect, I'm going to ask you those questions now. Okay. So John, whether it's John and Mary, you're going to talk to both of them. Let's just say I'm talking to John. All right. I'll be like, hey, John, so your full name's just John Smith. They say yes. I'm going to write down John Smith. Okay. And then John, how young are you? Oh, he says, well, I'm 38. Cool, John. Well, when is your birthday? What's your date of birth? Honestly, I don't know what that's going to be, but let's just make up something. 38. I'm not going to do the math. Let's just say 73. I don't know. Maybe they're 40. Okay. So then you get their age, their date of birth, and then I'll say, John, do you use any tobacco products? Or and he says, no, I don't. I say, perfect. And then now I'm going to go to occupation. So I know you said you're employed, John. What do you do for work? Oh, I'm an engineer. So I'm going to write engineer. And I say, cool. So what do you typically bring home per month? Like how much do you make a month after taxes? He's going to say, oh, I make $8,000. Awesome. I write down $8,000. Now I'm going to go focus, guys. This is very important, the mortgage information here. So on the lead, depending on the type, you might have that mortgage amount that they have, or their loan balance, or they don't. So this is where you're going to gather that information. So John, I know on here it says you owe about $300,000. Is that still about right? He's like, yeah, that's right. That's right. So I'll put $300,000. Next, the question I ask is how many years they've been at the residence, right? Some leads might be older, so it's just good to know how long they've been living there. So he says his balance is $300,000. I say, hey, John, so how long have you been living at the residence? He says, oh, about 3 years. Okay. So I'm going to write 3 years. And so now, as you guys know, real estate or homes, they appreciate over time. They're an appreciating asset. So what that means is every year, typically people have equity in their home. That's how, like I said, an appreciating asset. So by that point, I already know he's been living there for 3 years, so there has to be some equity that he's already gained. So how to find the equity is after we ask the loan balance and how many years they've been living at the residence, I'm going to say, perfect, John. So obviously you probably have some equity in there already. If you were to sell your home tomorrow, like whatever Zillow and Redfin saying, what is it valued at? He's going to say, oh, yeah, I saw that. It's about 500,000. So I'm going to, wow, okay. Now, guys, you do the quick math. That's $200,000 of equity. Make that a big deal for him, right? So I'm going to do that quick math. I'm going to say, oh, perfect, John. You have $200,000 of equity. Good for you. And obviously, we're going to want that equity to stay within your family and not go back to the bank if something were to happen, right? And he's like, right. So you're getting little solid yeses throughout the appointment, obviously. Highlight that equity. Next, I'm going to say, now, John, when you purchased this home, was it just a standard 30-year loan, right? So most people know when you get a home, it's normally 30 years. It's very rare that you might have someone who gets a 15-year term or a 20-year. And so he's going to say, yeah, it was 30 years. So I'm going to circle 30. And then next, I'm going to say, perfect. So what are your mortgage payments per month, John? He's going to say, oh, it's, $2,000. That's very important to know too. I am then going to ask him, so John, as far as I know you're making $2,000 or the mortgage is $2,000, do you keep it at $2,000 or do you pay a little extra? And he's going to say, no, I keep it at $2,000. So I'm going to circle no. Sometimes people do make extra payments, and I think that's important to note because they don't need to make those extra payments. And in the event you're going to show options, I think it's important to know that he's throwing an extra 100 or 200 or whatever the extra payments are, and we could allocate that towards a monthly premium. Okay, so that's why we asked that question. Okay, so next, I think one of the most important things is to find out how much they're saving per month. The reason why that's important is because we need to know when we are showing them options, what can we show them? If John's only able to save $200 a month, I'm not going to show him a product that's $300 a month. Okay, so it just makes you as a professional know and you're mindful of their budget. So this is how I ask that question. So I say, John, so obviously you make $8,000 a month. Your mortgage is $2,000 a month. After everything's all said and done, you pay all your bills, car insurance, utilities, groceries, fun stuff, hobbies. After all is said and done, what do you typically save per month? He's going to say, I save about 500 to 800. Okay, cool. So I'm just super casual. I write down 500 to 800, but this number is very important, guys, because like I mentioned, this is how you're going to write the options and showing them. You're not going to go too past their farther close to their like savings. I like to back down a little bit just because they're not going to put their whole month saving into this policy. All right. So next after that, I'm going to ask the question of like what they have for life insurance, okay? So I'm going to say, now I'm at this part of the financial inventory. I'm going to say, perfect. So John, do you have any type of life insurance on your name, anything through work or privately owned? He's going to say, I have something through work. So I'll circle work. To me, guys, that's not really important because we all know work insurance is not really their own. It's owned by the employer. And we all know that if it's kind of like a company vehicle, if he retires or leaves or gets fired, that insurance doesn't come with him. So he's not really insured. All right. And I'm not going to tell him like that. So if he says, no, I just have something through work, and I say, perfect, nothing private. He says, no, nothing private. So I'm going to circle work. I say, hey, John, I'm so glad that you have work insurance. That's awesome. Typically, it's pretty cheap. But just so you know, it's kind of owned by your employer. I'm glad that you do have it. But in the event, it's kind of like a company vehicle. If you retire, you leave, you get fired or whatever else, that coverage does not follow you. So technically, he doesn't have any coverage if it's work coverage. Okay. After that question, I'm then going to ask, so John, do you have anything that kind of acts like life insurance that's going to transfer to your mom if you were to suddenly pass away? Anything like a 401k, IRA, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, significant savings that's just lying around that's going to go to your mom if you suddenly passed away? He's going to say, oh, I might have a 401k, or maybe he says no, right? So just take note of that answer, whether it's a yes or a no and how much they have. The reason why that's important is that could be a different training, but that's how you could identify whether you can do, it's called a fixed index annuity. With our life license, we can, or maybe even help them with an IUL to gain some kind of retirement if they don't have anything set up. That could be a different training. I just want you to write the number down, talk to your manager if you do find some money there, and kind of move on from there. Okay. Next is the health questions. This is how I ask the health questions. This is very important. You're not going to say, hey, John, list all your medications. We're not going to do that. I like to ask condition, and if they say yes to a condition, then I circle the condition and I ask what medication they're taking for that condition or how many they're taking. Then I ask, when were you diagnosed with that condition, or when did you start taking that medication? So again, you identify what the condition is. If they say yes to it, you ask what medications they're taking for, write it down, and then also ask them, when were you diagnosed with that? So I'll give you an example. Okay, if I say, hey, John, do you have any heart issues, like any history of heart attack, stroke, cardiomyopathy, congestive heart failure, any stents, any AFib, any angina, any heart disease, anything for your heart? Then he's going to say no. So I move on to the next segment. Any liver issues like cirrhosis, hepatitis, liver failure? He's going to say no. And then I'm going to say, cool, any lung issues, asthma, COPD, emphysema, any oxygen tanks? He's going to say no. I move on to the next segment. Okay, any kidney issues, chronic kidney disease, kidney failure? No. And then now I'm going to go to, because most common conditions, just for your guys' knowledge, is high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, stuff like that. So this is how I ask that. John, any history of high blood pressure? Oh, yeah, I have high blood pressure. I'm going to circle high blood pressure. I'm going to write it down here. And then I'm going to say, perfect, John. So how many medications are you taking for high blood pressure? Just one, multiple? He's going to say, oh, I take, and then I know. So I'm going to say this. And as you do more appointments, you're going to know the common high blood pressure medication names. I'm going to say, perfect. So high blood pressure, like lisinopril and amlodipine. He's like, oh, yeah, lisinopril. So I'm going to write lisinopril. And quick tip, guys, if you don't know how to spell the medication, you could ask client, hey, can you spell that for me? Or Google's so good that they know medication names. Even if you misspell it, they're going to write down it's going to auto-populate the correct medication name. And this is why I love telesales, is you could have multiple screens up and you could sound like a professional if you don't know how to pronounce the medication or what the medication's for. So again, Google's your friend, and also just asking them kindly, hey, can you just spell that for me? And then write it down. And then if he says high blood pressure, I'm going to say, perfect. So I know you're taking lisinopril. Now, how long ago or when were you diagnosed with high blood pressure? He's going to say, I mean, like maybe 3 years ago or like 4 years ago. Okay, cool. So in 2020, does that sound right? Yeah. And then I might ask him, were you ever hospitalized for high blood pressure? He's going to say no. Okay. And then that's how I would get it if they say yes to a condition. Okay. Next, I'm going to say, hey, any cholesterol, diabetes? He's going to say, I do have diabetes. I'm going to say, perfect. So is that are you taking pills or insulin or both? He's going to say, oh, I'm just taking pill. Okay. What's the name of the medication? So again, I'm writing diabetes. And then he's going to say a pill. He's going to say metformin because that's a common one. Then I'm going to ask them, cool. Okay. So how old were you when you were diagnosed with diabetes? He's going to say, it was just 2 years ago. Okay. So 36, right? So I might write at age 36. And then I'm going to say, hey, any diabetic complications like neuropathy, nephropathy, anything, any complications from the diabetes? He's going to say no. Okay. And you go on all of those questions, you read them out, and then you circle them, and that's how you ask. Okay. And then the next thing that I'm going to ask is I'm going to say, hey, any recent hospitalizations or surgeries? And he's going to say no. So I know that. If there is hospitalizations or surgeries, you write it down there. Then the next thing you're going to ask them too is their height and weight. That's very important. So John, what's your estimated height and weight? He's going to say, I'm 6'2" and I don't know, 200 pounds. Awesome. Okay. Because you guys have to remember each carrier has a build chart. So if they're overweight, you can't show them a specific carrier that's going to decline them. So be very mindful about that. And your manager or whoever's helping you is going to be able to help you through the underwriting process if you're on Zoom. And I highly encourage you to be on Zoom. When you have an appointment, tell your manager, keep them in the loop, communicate with them. Hey, Des, I have 4 mortgage appointments. I want to let you know I'm going to be on Zoom all day. I'm going to text you when one is on so you could kind of listen in. Communicate with your manager on that part. Okay, now after all is said and done, when I read the medications, I think this is very important, is I'm going to reiterate or to have a recap to summarize what they just told me. So I'm going to say, John, just so I'm on the same page with you, it looks like the only thing that's going to pop up on your medical record is the high blood pressure and the diabetes. Am I missing anything else? They're going to say no, and I feel solid to move on. If they are like, then I'm kind of like, okay, well, let's find out what the heck you have, because here's the thing. If we apply not with all the information that we know, they could get declined, and now you kind of could lose the sale or lose the trust of the client. And sometimes they just forget. So I might say, why don't you just grab all your medications? Let's make sure we have all the correct information. Because remember, John, they're going to double check everything that's on your medical record, and I want to make sure I know what I'm having. Okay. So then he'll say, yep, that's all I have. And then I feel comfortable moving on. Next, I'm going to ask them, cool. So I know, just so we're on the same page, your mom's going to be the beneficiary, right? He says, yeah. What's your mom's full name? Okay. It's Brenda Smith. Cool. So I'm writing the beneficiary's name. Now that's his mom. So I'm going to write mom. What's her date of birth? Oh, it's 12/18 of, I don't know, 59. I don't know. The math is not good there. But anyway, so that's how I do the financial inventory. Okay. So then from there, guys, what's going to happen when you feel solid, you have all the information present, you're going to say, perfect, John. So just so you know, like I mentioned, I have all the different insurance carriers. I'm going to put you on a brief hold because I have to do a ton of underwriting just to make sure I could show you the best option. So I'm going to put you on a brief hold. Give me a couple minutes and I'll let you know when I'm back on the phone. Okay. And he says, okay. And then I put them on hold. And at this point, which is going to be the next segment, is after you get the financial inventory, including the medications, is what product are we going to look at? Is it normal mortgage protection or is it equity protection? And this is very important on how you're going to illustrate that to the client. All right. So I hope you guys learned a lot, and let me know if you have any questions.